This is the journey through the history of ancient Japan, a captivating exploration of a nation steeped in myth, culture, and resilience. From the earliest days of its prehistoric inhabitants to the intricate tapestry of traditions that shaped the Japanese archipelago, this video invites you to discover the remarkable evolution of one of the world's most fascinating civilizations. Chapter 1: The Dawn of Japan. The story of Japan begins long before the rise of its famous emperors, or the vibrant cultures we associate with it today. In fact, the roots of this island nation trace back thousands of years to a time when prehistoric peoples first set foot on its shores. This chapter, The Dawn of Japan, takes us back to the Jomon Period, a time marked by the emergence of some of the earliest known inhabitants of the Japanese archipelago. The Jomon Period, dating from approximately 14,000 BCE to 300 BCE, is characterized by its unique pottery style and a hunter-gatherer lifestyle. The term Jomon translates to cord-marked, a reference to the distinctive patterns found on their pottery, which were created by pressing cords into wet clay. This early craftsmanship showcases not only their artistic capabilities, but also their understanding of materials and techniques long before the introduction of advanced technology. As we delve deeper into the Jomon period, we discover a society that was well adapted to its environment. These early inhabitants relied on fishing, hunting, and foraging for sustenance. They crafted tools from stone and bone, which enabled them to hunt deer and gather wild plants. Evidence suggests that they lived in small, semi-permanent settlements, where they could efficiently utilize the rich resources provided by Japan's forests and rivers. Life during the Jomon period was closely tied to the natural world. The inhabitants of ancient Japan celebrated their connection to the land through rituals and the creation of various artifacts. They created figurines known as dog, which were often used in rituals related to fertility or agriculture. These small clay figures varied widely in style and form, suggesting that they held significant meaning within the culture, perhaps serving as talismans or representations of deities. The end of the Jomon period marks a significant transition in Japanese history. As climate conditions changed and new agricultural practices emerged, the Yayoi period began around 300 BCE. This period was characterized by the introduction of rice cultivation and metalworking, transforming the way people lived and interacted with one another. However, the Jomon period laid the foundation for the complex societal structures that would emerge in later centuries. The traditions, beliefs, and cultural practices established during this time continue to influence Japan today. Understanding this early history provides a crucial context for exploring the subsequent developments in Japanese civilization. As we move forward in our journey, we will uncover the fascinating evolution from the Jomon to the Yayoi period, where innovation and change sparked the rise of more complex societies. Chapter 2: The Yayoi Period. The Yayoi period, which began around 300 BCE and lasted until 300 CE, marked a pivotal transformation in the history of ancient Japan. This era is characterized by significant advancements in agriculture, social structure, and technology, setting the stage for the complex societies that would follow. As we step into this period, we find a remarkable shift from the hunter-gatherer lifestyle of the Jomon people to a more settled existence centered around agriculture. The introduction of rice cultivation, particularly wet rice farming, revolutionized the way people lived. This agricultural innovation not only provided a stable food source, but also led to the growth of population centers and the formation of villages. The Yayoi people were skilled in crafting tools and pottery, employing techniques learned from continental Asia. The Yayoi pottery is notably different from that of the Jomon. It is thinner, smoother, and often decorated with intricate patterns. These vessels played an essential role in daily life, serving for cooking, storage, and ceremonial practices. Archaeological evidence suggests that the Yayoi society was organized into clans or tribes, each led by chieftains. These leaders emerged as the agricultural surplus allowed for more complex social hierarchies. Wealth became concentrated in the hands of a few, giving rise to early forms of leadership and governance. This shift laid the groundwork for the eventual emergence of the Japanese imperial system. In addition to agriculture, the Yayoi period was a time of significant technological advancement. Iron and bronze tools were introduced, which improved farming efficiency and enabled the construction of more sophisticated infrastructure. Weapons and armor made from these materials became symbols of power and status, influencing the dynamics of social and political interactions. Trade flourished during this time, as Yayoi people engaged in exchanges with neighboring cultures. The influx of ideas and technologies from the Korean peninsula and China further enriched Yayoi society. Evidence of this interaction can be seen in the adoption of new religious practices, such as ancestor worship and the veneration of deities associated with agriculture. The Yayoi period also witnessed the beginnings of burial practices that would later evolve into more elaborate ceremonies. The dead were often interred in grave mounds, known as Kofun, and accompanied by goods that reflected their status in life. These practices hinted at the complex belief systems and social structures that would continue to develop in the coming centuries. As we delve deeper into this period, we also uncover a rich tapestry of myths and legends that arose alongside the historical narrative. These stories often illustrated the relationship between humanity and the divine, weaving together themes of nature, fertility, and the struggles for survival. The Yayoi people's connection to the land and their environment shaped their spiritual beliefs, fostering a sense of community and shared identity. The advancements made during the Yayoi period laid the groundwork for the subsequent formation of powerful states and the centralization of authority that characterized later eras. As agriculture flourished and society became more structured, the foundations of what would eventually become the Japanese nation began to take shape. Chapter 3: The Kofun Period. As we transition into the Kofun Period, spanning from approximately 300 to 710 CE, we witness a remarkable evolution in Japanese society, marked by the emergence of powerful regional chieftains and the establishment of what would become the early Japanese state. This era is named after the large burial mounds, or kofun, that became a defining feature of the time and serve as lasting monuments to the leaders of this period. The Kofun period is characterized by a profound shift in social organization, with the development of powerful clans led by elite warriors. These clans competed for territory and resources, leading to the consolidation of power in the hands of a few influential figures. As agriculture continued to thrive, these chieftains utilized their wealth to construct impressive burial mounds, reflecting their status and authority. The kofun themselves vary in shape and size, with some resembling keyholes or tombs, while others take on more simplistic earthen structures. The larger kofun, often surrounded by moats and lined with haniwa ceramic figures placed as offerings, served as final resting places for chieftains and their families. The haniwa figurines are particularly fascinating, representing various aspects of daily life, from warriors and horses to dancers and animals, showcasing the cultural beliefs and practices of the time. The social hierarchy during this period was heavily influenced by the warrior class, which began to emerge as a dominant force. The leaders of these clans maintained control through military prowess, as conflict and competition were common. These chieftains not only focused on territorial expansion, but also established intricate networks of alliances and trade, leading to increased interactions with neighboring cultures, particularly those from the Korean peninsula. The influence of continental cultures during the Kofun period cannot be understated. Through trade and contact, Japan began to adopt various cultural practices, including the introduction of advanced metallurgy, writing systems, and agricultural techniques. This exchange of ideas and technologies laid the groundwork for the future development of Japanese civilization. One of the most significant developments during this period was the rise of the Yamato clan, which would eventually become the imperial family of Japan. As the Yamato clan solidified its power, they claimed descent from the sun goddess Amaterasu, establishing a divine right to rule that would resonate through Japanese history. This connection to the divine legitimized their authority and allowed them to unify various clans under a centralized government. As the Kofun period progressed, the influence of Buddhism began to permeate Japanese society, setting the stage for the religious transformations that would follow. The introduction of Buddhism, along with other cultural practices from the Asian continent, created a rich tapestry of beliefs that blended with the indigenous Shinto traditions. This synthesis of ideas would have lasting implications for the spiritual landscape of Japan. Art and craftsmanship flourished during the Kofun period, with advancements in pottery, metalwork, and textiles. The intricate designs and decorative techniques used in Kofun artifacts reflect the sophistication of Yayoi and Kofun artisans. The blending of artistic styles from the continent also contributed to this rich cultural milieu, resulting in distinctive Japanese art forms. The Kofun period was a time of both conflict and consolidation. The competition among clans, the rise of the Yamato clan, and the influences from continental Asia all played crucial roles in shaping early Japanese society. As the nation began to find its identity, the foundations for a centralized state were being laid, setting the stage for the profound changes that would come in the subsequent periods. Chapter 4. The Asuka Period. As we move into the Asuka Period, which spans from 538 to 710 CE, we enter a transformative era in Japan's history. This period marks the beginning of Japan's adoption of many elements from continental Asia, particularly China and Korea, and the formal introduction of Buddhism, which would dramatically alter the cultural, political, and spiritual landscape of Japan. The Asuka period gets its name from the Asuka region, which served as the center of political power at the time. This era is characterized by political consolidation, the rise of imperial authority, and significant cultural and religious change. One of the most significant aspects of this period is the introduction of Buddhism to Japan, which began in the mid-6th century and grew rapidly in influence, due in large part to the efforts of Prince Shotoku. Prince Shotoku stands as one of the most important figures of the Asuka period. Acting as regent for Empress Suiko, he was a fervent supporter of Buddhism and a champion of reforms that strengthened the central authority of the imperial family. He is credited with the creation of the 17-article constitution, which was heavily influenced by Confucian and Buddhist principles. This constitution was more of a moral and ethical guideline than a legal document, but it emphasized the importance of harmony, centralized governance, and respect for authority. Buddhism's introduction during the Asuka period was met with initial resistance, as it clashed with the traditional Shinto beliefs that had long been the cornerstone of Japanese spirituality. Shinto, which revolved around the worship of kami natural spirits and deities, was deeply embedded in Japan's cultural identity. However, over time, Buddhism began to gain acceptance, particularly among the ruling elites, who saw its potential for reinforcing social order and unifying the nation. As Buddhism spread, so did its artistic and architectural influences. The Asuka period witnessed the construction of some of Japan's first Buddhist temples, the most famous being the Horyuji Temple, which still stands today as one of the world's oldest wooden buildings. These temples became centers of learning and culture, where Buddhist monks translated scriptures and taught the philosophies of their faith. The influence of continental art forms is evident in the statues, paintings, and architecture of the time, all of which were heavily inspired by Chinese and Korean styles. Culturally, the Asuka period represents the first time Japan began to look outward, adopting Chinese systems of governance, architecture, and writing. The adoption of the Chinese calendar, the practice of sending envoys to the Chinese court, and the introduction of Chinese-style government institutions all point to a period of intense cultural borrowing. The creation of a bureaucratic system modeled after China allowed the Japanese imperial court to centralize authority and strengthen its hold over the nation. However, this period wasn't without conflict. The Soga clan, a powerful aristocratic family, played a central role in promoting Buddhism and consolidating power. Their dominance led to tensions with other powerful families, notably the Mononobe and Nakatomi clans, who remained loyal to Shinto and were wary of the growing influence of Buddhism. This rivalry eventually culminated in the Soga's victory, which solidified the influence of Buddhism in the political and religious spheres of Japan. In the political sphere, Japan saw the rise of the Taika reforms in 645, a series of sweeping changes aimed at strengthening imperial power by implementing a centralized government based on the Chinese model. These reforms were introduced after a coup that resulted in the fall of the Soga clan and the rise of Emperor Kotoku. The Taika reforms aimed to redistribute land, reorganize local governance, and implement a system of taxation, all of which would allow the emperor to have direct control over the lands and people of Japan. Another key development of the Asuka period was the increasing importance of the Yamato clan, which had laid the groundwork for centralized rule in the previous era. The Yamato court, with its connection to the sun goddess Amaterasu, continued to assert its divine right to rule, and during the Asuka period, it solidified its status as the ruling family of Japan. The consolidation of power in the hands of the Yamato emperors would set the stage for the formation of a more structured imperial system in the coming Nara period. The Asuka period also saw the refinement of Japan's artistic identity. The introduction of Chinese calligraphy, painting, and sculpture led to the fusion of native Japanese art forms with continental styles, creating a unique blend that would influence future generations. The use of bronze and stone for statues, as well as the development of advanced techniques in pottery and textiles, helped create the rich artistic traditions that Japan is known for today. The Asuka period is thus seen as a time of significant transition. Politically, it marked the beginning of Japan's imperial state. Religiously, it saw the introduction and spread of Buddhism, which would become a central part of Japanese culture. And artistically, it laid the foundations for the flourishing of Japanese art, influenced by both native traditions and foreign innovations. Chapter 5. The Nara Period. The Nara Period, which lasted from 710 to 794 CE, is often seen as a golden age for early Japan. During this time, the imperial capital was established in Nara, modeled after the great Chinese capital of Chang'an, signifying a period of significant political and cultural development. This period saw the consolidation of centralized government, the flourishing of Buddhist culture, and the birth of Japan's first written historical records. The decision to establish a permanent capital at Nara was a significant step toward centralization. Before this, the imperial capital had moved frequently, often in response to changes in emperors or political climates. With the establishment of Nara as a fixed capital, the Japanese court gained more stability, allowing for greater administrative control and the growth of the imperial state. Nara was laid out in a grid pattern, imitating the design of Chinese cities, reflecting Japan's continued admiration of Chinese culture and governance. One of the defining features of the Nara period was the rise of Buddhism to unprecedented heights. The Nara court, especially under Emperor Shomu, was a strong proponent of the Buddhist faith. Emperor Shomu is perhaps best remembered for commissioning the construction of Todaiji Temple, which housed the great Buddha statue, one of the largest bronze statues in the world at the time. This massive structure was not just a symbol of religious devotion, but also a demonstration of the emperor's power and the unity of the state under Buddhism. Buddhism's influence during this period also extended to governance. The monks became key political figures, with the construction of numerous temples across Japan, strengthening the bond between the state and religion. These temples were often endowed with large estates and became centers of local power, blurring the lines between religious and secular authority. In fact, this intertwining of Buddhism with political life created tensions within the court, as the increasing influence of the monastic order challenged the authority of the imperial family. In addition to the flourishing of Buddhism, the Nara period also marked the beginning of recorded Japanese history and literature. The Kojiki and Nihon Shoki, two of Japan's oldest surviving texts, were compiled during this time. These works combined myth, legend, and history to present the imperial family as descendants of the gods, legitimizing their rule and reinforcing the notion of the emperor's divine right. The Manyoshu, a collection of thousands of poems, also emerged during this period, showcasing the poetic talents of both the aristocracy and commoners alike. This literary flourishing allowed Japan to preserve its cultural identity while drawing inspiration from Chinese and Korean influences. In the realm of government, the Ritsuryo system, a set of administrative and penal codes based on Chinese law, was firmly established during this period. This system organized the bureaucracy, defined land ownership, and implemented a system of taxation that allowed the central government to collect resources more effectively. However, despite these advancements, the imperial court faced challenges in maintaining control over the provinces. Local leaders and powerful families often resisted central authority, and the sprawling bureaucracy sometimes struggled to enforce the laws across Japan's vast territories. The Nara period also saw the development of distinct Japanese art forms. While continental influences from China and Korea remained strong, particularly in Buddhist sculpture and painting, Japanese artists began to develop a unique aesthetic that would evolve over the centuries. Bronze and clay statues of Buddhist figures became more refined, and temples like Todaiji and Kofukuji showcase the fusion of native and foreign architectural styles. Meanwhile, calligraphy, poetry, and music flourished within the court, reflecting the growing sophistication of Japanese culture. Although the Nara period was marked by cultural and political achievements, it was not without its challenges. The cost of constructing grand Buddhist temples and the maintenance of a sprawling bureaucracy placed a significant strain on the imperial treasury. Additionally, the growing power of Buddhist temples, particularly their vast landholdings, created political instability. Tensions between the court and the religious institutions would eventually prompt a shift in political power in the following Heian period. Overall, the Nara period represents a crucial turning point in Japan's history. It was a time of consolidation, centralization, and cultural growth, laying the foundation for the emergence of a more distinctly Japanese identity. The fusion of foreign influences with native traditions, the development of early Japanese literature and art, and the deepening of Buddhism's role in society all contributed to shaping the future of the nation. Chapter 6. The Heian Period. The Heian Period, lasting from 794 to 1185 CE, was a time of significant transformation in Japan, marking the pinnacle of imperial court culture and the development of a distinctly Japanese identity. Named after the capital city of Heian-kyo, present-day Kyoto, this era saw the rise of an aristocratic culture that left a profound impact on Japanese art, literature, and governance. One of the most defining features of the Heian period was the growing political influence of the Fujiwara clan. Through strategic marriages and alliances, the Fujiwara family effectively controlled the imperial court for much of this period. By marrying their daughters into the imperial family, they placed themselves in positions of power, often acting as regents for young emperors. While the emperor remained the symbolic head of state, real political authority was often concentrated in the hands of the Fujiwara regents, allowing them to manipulate court politics behind the scenes. This rise of aristocratic dominance paralleled a shift in governance, while the Nara period was characterized by a focus on centralized government based on Chinese models. The Heian period saw the gradual decline of the Ritsuryo system. Local governance became more decentralized as provincial leaders, particularly powerful warrior families, gained autonomy. This shift in power laid the groundwork for the eventual rise of the samurai class and feudalism in later periods. The Heian court became the center of an extraordinary cultural flowering, particularly in the realms of literature and art. Aristocrats immersed themselves in poetry, calligraphy, and music, cultivating a refined aesthetic that became the hallmark of the period. This is perhaps best exemplified by the Tale of Genji, written by Murasaki Shikibu, one of Japan's greatest literary achievements. Considered the world's first novel, The Tale of Genji is a richly detailed account of court life, love, and the complexities of human emotions. It offers a glimpse into the sophisticated culture of the Heian aristocracy, where poetry and personal refinement were paramount. Women played a significant role in Heian culture, particularly in the world of literature. Figures like Murasaki Shikibu and Sei Shonagon, author of the Pillow Book, emerged as influential writers, offering insights into life at court through their works. These female authors, despite living in a highly patriarchal society, created some of Japan's most enduring literature, exploring themes of love, politics, and the fleeting nature of life. Their writings captured the elegance, emotional depth, and complexity of the Heian court, showcasing the artistic and intellectual achievements of the period. The Heian period was also notable for its developments in visual art and architecture. Aristocratic homes and temples were adorned with delicate screen paintings and folding fans, often featuring nature scenes or depictions of court life. The Yamato-e style of painting, which focused on native Japanese landscapes and themes, emerged as a significant art form, moving away from earlier Chinese influences. The Heian aristocracy's fascination with aesthetics extended to every aspect of life, from clothing and poetry to garden design, where balance and beauty were paramount. Buddhism continued to play a significant role in Heian society, though it underwent important transformations. While earlier periods saw the state sponsorship of large temples and the political involvement of Buddhist clergy, the Heian period saw the rise of more esoteric and mystical forms of Buddhism. Schools like Tendai and Shingon, introduced from China, focused on complex rituals, meditation, and cosmology. These esoteric sects appealed to the aristocracy, offering them spiritual practices that promised salvation and enlightenment. As the Heian period progressed, however, political instability began to emerge. The court's increasing isolation from the provinces, combined with the rise of powerful regional clans and the warrior class, weakened central authority. The aristocratic lifestyle at court became more detached from the realities of governance, leading to the decline of the imperial state's influence over the provinces. Local warlords and samurai began to rise in power, setting the stage for the conflict and upheaval that would characterize the end of the period. By the late Heian period, the power of the Fujiwara clan had waned, and rival clans like the Taira and Minamoto began to vie for control. This growing rivalry would culminate in the Genpei War, a conflict that ultimately ended the Heian period and ushered in the age of the samurai and the establishment of the Kamakura shogunate. Despite its eventual decline, the Heian period left an indelible mark on Japanese culture. The art, literature, and aesthetic values developed during this time continued to influence Japanese society for centuries. The period's emphasis on beauty, refinement, and cultural sophistication, as well as the growing influence of native Japanese traditions over foreign models, helped shape the foundation of Japan's cultural identity. Chapter 7: The Rise of the Samurai. As Japan transitioned from the Heian period to the early medieval era, the country experienced a profound shift in its political and social landscape. The rise of the samurai class was one of the most transformative changes in Japanese history, signaling the end of the aristocratic dominance of the imperial court and the emergence of a new form of governance rooted in military power. This period, stretching roughly from the late 12th century onward, set the stage for the feudal era, where samurai warriors would not only dominate the battlefield, but also play a pivotal role in shaping Japanese society. To understand the rise of the samurai, we must first examine the political instability and power struggles that marked the late Heian period. The imperial court, increasingly detached from the provinces and obsessed with its own cultural refinement, began to lose its grip on the outer regions. Powerful landowning families known as bushi or warriors began to assert control over local affairs. These warrior families were the early precursors to the samurai class, and they would become crucial to the survival of the state as the imperial government faltered. At the heart of the samurai's rise was their function as protectors of the aristocracy. Originally employed as military retainers by wealthy landowners to defend estates from bandits and rival clans, these warriors developed into highly skilled fighters who adhered to a strict code of loyalty and honor. As provincial power became increasingly militarized, the samurai's role grew from estate protectors to political power brokers. Two of the most prominent warrior families to emerge during this time were the Taira and Minamoto clans. The rivalry between these two families came to a head during the Genpei War, which raged from 1180 to 1185. This conflict would be the decisive event that signaled the end of the Heian period and the dawn of the age of the samurai. The Genpei War was not merely a battle between two powerful clans, but a struggle for control over the imperial court and, by extension, the country. The Taira clan, which had enjoyed considerable influence at court, faced growing resistance from the Minamoto clan, who had amassed significant support in the provinces. Both clans fielded vast armies composed primarily of samurai warriors, and the conflict escalated into a full-scale civil war. After a series of fierce battles, the Minamoto clan emerged victorious under the leadership of Minamoto no Yoritomo. The defeat of the Taira at the Battle of Dan no Ura in 1185 was a watershed moment in Japanese history. It not only ended the dominance of the Taira clan but also marked the beginning of a new political order led by the samurai. With this victory, Yoritomo established the Kamakura shogunate in 1192, officially taking on the title of shogun, or military ruler, and placing the real power of governance in the hands of the warrior class. The establishment of the Kamakura shogunate fundamentally altered Japan's political structure. While the emperor remained a symbolic figurehead, actual power was now concentrated in the hands of the samurai and their leaders. The shogun, as the military ruler, governed through a network of loyal samurai retainers who were rewarded with land and privileges in exchange for their service. This system of governance, known as feudalism, placed loyalty and military service at the center of political life, in contrast to the previous system of aristocratic rule based on birthright and cultural prestige. The rise of the samurai was not only a political revolution but also a cultural one. As the warrior class gained power, they began to cultivate their own values and traditions, which would come to define the samurai way of life. The concept of Bushido, or the way of the warrior, became central to samurai identity. Rooted in principles of loyalty, honor, discipline, and martial skill, Bushido emphasized a code of conduct that shaped the samurai's approach to life and battle. Samurai were expected to live with a sense of duty, even to the point of sacrificing their own lives for the sake of their lord. This culture of loyalty and honor would become one of the most enduring legacies of the samurai class. The samurai were also deeply influenced by the spiritual and philosophical teachings of Zen Buddhism, which found a receptive audience among the warrior class. Zen emphasized meditation, self-discipline, and mindfulness, principles that resonated with the samurai ethos of mental and physical mastery. Samurai adopted Zen practices not only as a form of personal development, but also as a way to prepare for the hardships and uncertainties of battle. The integration of Zen into samurai culture helped to further distinguish the warrior class from the aristocrats of the Heian court, who had been more focused on aesthetics and refinement. In addition to their martial and spiritual development, the samurai were also patrons of the arts. As their influence grew, they supported the creation of new art forms, including ink painting and no theater, which reflected the austere and disciplined values of the warrior class. The samurai's patronage of these art forms ensured that they would leave an indelible mark on Japan's cultural heritage. While the rise of the samurai was a time of great transformation, it was also a period of constant conflict and upheaval. The warrior class's dominance led to a society organized around military power, where disputes between rival clans often resulted in warfare. This era of samurai rule would continue for centuries, leading to both great achievements and periods of intense strife. Ultimately, the rise of the samurai was not just about the ascendancy of a warrior class, but the birth of a new Japan. This period laid the foundation for the medieval feudal system that would dominate Japan for the next several centuries, defining the country's political, cultural, and spiritual identity. Chapter 8. The Kamakura Period. The Kamakura Period, which began in 1185 and lasted until 1333, marked a dramatic shift in the political landscape of Japan. It was a time when power transitioned from the aristocratic court in Kyoto to the hands of the warrior class, centered in Kamakura, a city far to the east of the traditional seat of power. The establishment of the Kamakura shogunate under Minamoto no Yoritomo formalized this shift, creating a new form of governance that was both highly militarized and deeply decentralized. This era is widely regarded as the beginning of feudal Japan, a system that would endure for centuries. The Kamakura period arose in the aftermath of the Genpei War, a brutal conflict between the Taira and Minamoto clans that ended with the victory of Minamoto no Yoritomo and the defeat of the Taira at the Battle of Dan no Ura in 1185. Yoritomo's triumph over the Taira clan solidified his dominance, allowing him to establish the Kamakura shogunate, a military government that would govern Japan for over a century. Under this system, Yoritomo and his successors held the title of shogun, the military ruler, while the emperor remained a largely ceremonial figure in Kyoto, maintaining symbolic power but little practical authority. One of the most significant aspects of the Kamakura period was the introduction of a feudal system that closely mirrored the European model of governance at the time. Samurai warriors, who had risen to prominence during the late Heian period, became the backbone of this new society. Samurai were bound by oaths of loyalty to their lords known as daimyo, who in turn swore allegiance to the shogun. In exchange for their military service, these samurai were granted land, a critical source of wealth and power in an agricultural society. The Kamakura shogunate was thus a highly stratified system, with power flowing from the shogun at the top, through the daimyo, and down to the samurai and peasants at the bottom. The Kamakura period was also a time of significant cultural and religious development. Perhaps the most notable influence during this era was the growing prominence of Buddhism, particularly Zen Buddhism, which had begun to take root in Japan during the late Heian period. Zen emphasized meditation, self-discipline, and direct insight into the nature of existence, concepts that resonated deeply with the samurai class. Zen's focus on mental fortitude and personal discipline mirrored the ideals of Bushido, the warrior code, and many samurai adopted Zen practices as part of their spiritual training. Another form of Buddhism that gained widespread appeal during the Kamakura period was Pure Land Buddhism. In contrast to the austere and individualistic path of Zen, Pure Land Buddhism offered a more accessible and devotional form of practice, focusing on faith in the Buddha Amida and the promise of rebirth in the Pure Land, a paradise free from suffering. Pure Land teachings appealed to the masses, particularly the peasantry, who found solace in the idea of salvation in the afterlife, amidst the turmoil of a society constantly threatened by warfare. Although the Kamakura shogunate brought a degree of stability to Japan, it was not without its challenges. One of the most significant external threats came in the form of the Mongol invasions, which took place in 1274 and 1281. The Mongol Empire, led by Kublai Khan, sought to extend its reach into Japan after successfully conquering vast swathes of Asia. The first Mongol invasion saw a formidable fleet of ships and tens of thousands of soldiers land on the shores of Kyushu, Japan's southernmost main island. Although the Mongols initially gained ground, they were eventually repelled by a combination of fierce samurai resistance and the sudden arrival of a powerful typhoon, which decimated the Mongol fleet. This storm, which the Japanese believed was sent by the gods, became known as the Kamikaze, or Divine Wind. A second Mongol invasion followed in 1281, this time with an even larger fleet. Once again, the samurai fought valiantly to defend their homeland. And once again, a typhoon struck, destroying much of the Mongol fleet and forcing their retreat. The twin defeats of the Mongol invaders cemented the reputation of the samurai as formidable defenders of Japan, and the Kamikaze became a symbol of divine protection over the nation. While the Mongol invasions were ultimately unsuccessful, they had significant consequences for the Kamakura shogunate. The cost of defending against the invasions placed a heavy financial burden on the shogunate, which struggled to reward its samurai for their service. Unlike previous wars, where victory led to the acquisition of land and wealth that could be distributed as rewards, the defeat of the Mongols yielded no such spoils. This created tensions between the shogunate and its vassals, many of whom felt unrewarded for their efforts. In addition to these internal strains, the Kamakura shogunate faced increasing resistance from rival clans, particularly the powerful Hojo clan, which had served as regents for the shoguns. Over time, the Hojo clan amassed considerable power, effectively ruling Japan in the name of the shogun. This concentration of power within the Hojo family alienated many other warrior families, sowing the seeds of discontent that would eventually lead to the downfall of the Kamakura shogunate. The final blow came in 1333, when Emperor Go-Daigo launched a rebellion against the shogunate, seeking to restore imperial power. The rebellion, known as the Kenmu Restoration, succeeded in overthrowing the Kamakura shogunate, bringing an end to over a century of samurai rule from Kamakura. However, the Kenmu Restoration would be short-lived, as the samurai class remained the dominant force in Japanese politics, setting the stage for the rise of the Ashikaga shogunate and the continuation of feudal rule in Japan. Chapter 9. The Muromachi Period. The Muromachi Period, also known as the Ashikaga Period, began in 1336 and lasted until 1573. It was named after the district in Kyoto, where the Ashikaga shoguns had their headquarters. This era was one of political fragmentation, economic growth, and rich cultural development. The period was defined by the rule of the Ashikaga shogunate, which was established by Ashikaga Takauji after the downfall of the Kamakura shogunate, and the brief Kenmu restoration by Emperor Go-Daigo. After Emperor Go-Daigo's attempt to restore imperial authority failed, Takauji seized the opportunity to establish his own military government. Unlike the Kamakura shogunate, which was centered in Kamakura, the Ashikaga shogunate was based in Kyoto, closer to the imperial court. While the Ashikaga shogunate claimed authority, its power was far more decentralized than that of its predecessors, and local warlords or daimyo exercised considerable autonomy. This lack of centralized control would sow the seeds of the chaos that later unfolded during the Warring States period. One of the major early events of the Muromachi period was the Nanboku-cho, or Southern and Northern Courts conflict, a civil war that lasted from 1336 to 1392. The war was fought between two rival imperial courts, one led by Emperor Go-Daigo and his loyalists, and the other by the Ashikaga-backed Northern Court. The Southern Court, based in Yoshino, claimed to represent the true imperial lineage, while the Northern Court, based in Kyoto, was a puppet of the Ashikaga shoguns. The conflict weakened both sides and led to significant social and political upheaval throughout Japan. It eventually ended with the unification of the two courts in 1392, but the damage to the country's stability had been done. Despite the political instability, the Muromachi period was also a time of significant cultural achievements. The Ashikaga shoguns were great patrons of the arts, and under their influence, Japan saw the flourishing of what is now known as Muromachi culture. This era saw the rise of Zen Buddhism, which had begun to spread during the Kamakura period, but truly took root in Japanese society during the Muromachi period. Zen temples became centers of culture, fostering the development of the tea ceremony, ink painting, garden design, and no theater. The tea ceremony, or chanoyu, which was influenced by Zen philosophy, became an important cultural ritual during this period. The ceremony emphasized simplicity, humility, and attention to detail, all values that resonated with the principles of Zen. Tea masters like Murata Juko and later Sen no Rikyu would refine the ceremony into the highly ritualized art form that continues to be practiced today. In the realm of visual arts, ink painting, suibokuga, flourished, with artists like Seishu Toyo mastering the technique of using simple black ink to create evocative landscapes and portraits. This style of painting was deeply influenced by Chinese aesthetics, but over time, it developed a distinctively Japanese character, blending Zen philosophy with indigenous artistic sensibilities. Another important cultural development of the Muromachi period was the emergence of No theater. No, which combined dance, music, and drama, was heavily influenced by Shinto and Buddhist themes. It was often performed for the samurai class and featured slow, deliberate movements, minimalistic staging, and a focus on spiritual and philosophical themes. No plays typically dealt with topics like the impermanence of life, the power of karma, and the pursuit of enlightenment. While the Ashikaga shogunate presided over these cultural advancements, their political control gradually eroded over time. By the mid-15th century, the country was descending into chaos once again. The Onin War, 1467-1477, was a pivotal event that accelerated the collapse of centralized power and marked the beginning of the Sengoku, or Warring States period. The Onin War was a conflict between rival factions within the Ashikaga family and their allies, but its effects were far-reaching, plunging the entire country into a prolonged period of civil war. The Ashikaga shoguns, while initially powerful, became increasingly irrelevant as regional warlords, or daimyo, rose to prominence. These daimyo governed their territories with near-complete autonomy and frequently clashed with one another in a struggle for dominance. The Ashikaga shogunate lingered on in name, but real power had shifted to the daimyo and their armies of samurai. This era of conflict would continue for over a century, shaping the political landscape of Japan in profound ways. One key figure of the later Muromachi period was Ashikaga Yoshimitsu, the third shogun, who ruled from 1368 to 1394. Yoshimitsu played a crucial role in stabilizing the Ashikaga regime and fostering cultural development. He famously completed the unification of the southern and northern courts, bringing an end to the Nanboku-Cho conflict. Yoshimitsu was also a major patron of the arts, and is credited with commissioning the construction of Kinkaku-ji, the Golden Pavilion, a Zen Buddhist temple that stands as one of the most iconic symbols of Kyoto. Despite Yoshimitsu's accomplishments, the Ashikaga shogunate would not maintain its strength. His successors struggled to keep the daimyo in check, and by the time of the Onin War, the shogunate had lost nearly all effective control over Japan. The Muromachi period's political fragmentation and the rise of the daimyo set the stage for the Sengoku period, a time of relentless warfare and social upheaval that would shape Japan's history for generations to come. Chapter 10, the Azuchi-Momoyama Period. The Azuchi-Momoyama period, spanning from 1573 to 1600, was one of the most dynamic and transformative periods in Japan's history. This era was marked by the rise of powerful warlords and the final steps in Japan's unification after over a century of near-constant warfare. Named after the castles of two prominent figures, Oda Nobunaga's Azuchi Castle, and Toyotomi Hideyoshi's Momoyama Castle, the period signaled the end of the Warring States, or Sengoku period, and the emergence of a more unified and centralized Japan. Though brief, this period set the stage for the enduring peace that would follow under the Tokugawa shogunate. The fall of the Ashikaga shogunate, coupled with the internal chaos of the Warring States, had left Japan fractured. Regional daimyo fought bitterly to expand their domains, and samurai armies clashed in endless battles for supremacy. But by the mid-16th century, three key figures would rise to bring an end to this period of division: Oda Nobunaga, Toyotomi Hideyoshi, and Tokugawa Ieyasu. Together, these men are often referred to as the great unifiers of Japan. The first of these unifiers, Oda Nobunaga, was a fierce and visionary daimyo from Owari province. His rise to power was swift and brutal. Nobunaga used innovative military tactics, including the early and effective use of firearms, to gain victories over much larger forces. One of his most notable achievements came in 1575 at the Battle of Nagashino, where his forces, using rifles and volley fire, decimated the cavalry of the Takeda clan. Nobunaga's relentless pursuit of power eventually led him to overthrow the Ashikaga shogunate in 1573, marking the beginning of the Azuchi-Momoyama period. Nobunaga's rule was characterized by his desire to break the traditional feudal system. He enacted policies that reduced the power of the Buddhist monasteries, which had previously been influential political players. Nobunaga also encouraged commerce, promoted the arts, and sought to open Japan to foreign trade and influences, particularly with European merchants and missionaries. However, his ruthless methods and drive for dominance earned him many enemies, and in 1582, he was betrayed and forced to commit seppuku during the incident at Honnoji. After Nobunaga's death, his loyal general, Toyotomi Hideyoshi, quickly filled the power vacuum. Hideyoshi was a remarkable figure, a man of humble origins, who rose through the ranks to become one of the most powerful leaders in Japan. Though born the son of a peasant, he possessed extraordinary military and diplomatic skill, enabling him to continue Nobunaga's work of unification. By 1590, Hideyoshi had effectively brought the entire country under his control, ending the centuries-long struggle between the warring daimyo. Hideyoshi's leadership marked the height of the Azuchi-Momoyama period. He implemented a number of reforms that helped consolidate his power and stabilize the nation. One of his most significant policies was the sword hunt, katanagari, which disarmed the peasantry and restricted the carrying of weapons to the samurai class. This effectively separated the warrior class from the common people, reinforcing a rigid social hierarchy that would endure for centuries. Hideyoshi also issued land surveys to more accurately assess tax obligations and instituted a freeze on social mobility, ensuring that people remained within their designated social classes. Despite his domestic successes, Hideyoshi harbored ambitions of expanding Japan's influence beyond its borders. In 1592, he launched an ambitious campaign to invade Korea, intending to eventually conquer China. While initially successful in seizing parts of Korea, the campaign soon turned into a costly stalemate, as the Korean forces, with assistance from the Chinese Ming dynasty, pushed back the Japanese invaders. Hideyoshi's dreams of a Japanese empire were never realized, and his failed Korean invasions left Japan exhausted and depleted by the time of his death in 1598. After Hideyoshi's passing, a power struggle ensued over control of Japan. Although Hideyoshi had named his young son Hideyori as his heir, the country soon fell under the control of Tokugawa Ieyasu, one of Hideyoshi's most trusted allies. Ieyasu had strategically positioned himself to seize power in the aftermath of Hideyoshi's death, and in 1600, he secured his dominance at the decisive Battle of Sekigahara. This victory allowed Ieyasu to establish the Tokugawa shogunate, bringing an end to the Azuchi-Momoyama period and ushering in the Edo period, a time of long-lasting peace and stability. Culturally, the Azuchi-Momoyama period was one of great innovation and artistic expression. Nobunaga and Hideyoshi both had a strong interest in the arts, and their patronage led to the flourishing of unique architectural styles, vibrant screen paintings, and elaborate tea ceremonies. The construction of massive, ostentatious castles became a symbol of power during this time. Nobunaga's Azuchi Castle, though short-lived, set the standard for grandiose castle designs, while Hideyoshi's Momoyama Castle, from which the period takes its name, represented the pinnacle of castle architecture in Japan. These castles not only served as military fortresses, but also as centers of culture and politics, where art and diplomacy were cultivated. In addition to architecture, the tea ceremony, under the guidance of masters like Sen no Rikyu, evolved into a highly refined cultural practice. The tea ceremony reflected the Zen principles of simplicity and mindfulness, serving as a spiritual exercise as well as a social ritual. Rikyu in particular emphasized wabi-sabi, the appreciation of beauty in imperfection and impermanence, which became a core tenet of Japanese aesthetics. Foreign trade also played a significant role during this period. Portuguese and Spanish traders, along with Catholic missionaries, arrived in Japan, introducing new goods, technologies, and religious ideas. Firearms, in particular, transformed Japanese warfare, while Christianity began to take root among some segments of the population. Though initially welcomed, foreign influence would later be viewed with suspicion by Japanese leaders, especially under the Tokugawa shogunate, leading to the eventual closure of Japan to the outside world. The Azuchi-Momoyama period, while short in duration, left an indelible mark on Japan's history. It was a time of great warriors, political upheaval, and cultural flourishing. The efforts of Oda Nobunaga, Toyotomi Hideyoshi, and Tokugawa Ieyasu to unify the country laid the foundation for the peace that would follow in the Edo period. The art, architecture, and rituals of this era continue to influence Japanese culture today, reflecting a time when Japan stood at the crossroads of tradition and modernization. Chapter 11. The Edo Period. The Edo Period, also known as the Tokugawa Period, spanned over 250 years, from 1603 to 1868. It was a time of peace, stability, and isolation, when Japan flourished under the rule of the Tokugawa shogunate. After centuries of warfare and chaos, the Edo period marked a stark contrast to the earlier, war-torn periods, and it would shape Japanese society and culture in profound ways. Tokugawa Ieyasu, the first shogun of the Tokugawa dynasty, rose to power after his decisive victory at the Battle of Sekigahara in 1600. Following the battle, Ieyasu consolidated his power, and in 1603, established the shogunate in Edo, the city that would eventually become Tokyo. The Tokugawa shogunate implemented a feudal system that centralized power in the hands of the shogun, while maintaining a delicate balance between the various daimyo, or regional lords, across the country. One of the most significant aspects of the Edo period was the strict social order that Tokugawa Ieyasu put in place. This rigid hierarchy divided Japanese society into four main classes: samurai, peasants, artisans, and merchants. Samurai, who had previously been warriors in constant battle, became bureaucrats and administrators under the Tokugawa government. Peasants worked the land, while artisans and merchants provided goods and services. Movement between these classes was almost impossible, creating a stable, if somewhat inflexible, social structure. Under this new system, the daimyo were required to live in Edo for part of the year and maintain a residence there. This policy, known as Sankin Kotai or alternate attendance, helped the Tokugawa shogunate control the daimyo by keeping their families in Edo as de facto hostages. It also led to the development of a highly urbanized culture in Edo, as daimyo, samurai, and their retainers flooded the city, bringing wealth, culture, and political influence. Though the Edo period was largely peaceful, it was also a time of strict isolation. Under Tokugawa rule, Japan enacted the Sakoku or closed country policy, which restricted foreign trade and limited contact with the outside world. Foreign missionaries and merchants, especially from Europe, were expelled, and Christianity was banned. Trade was permitted only with a select few nations, primarily China, Korea, and the Dutch, who were confined to a small trading post on the island of Dejima in Nagasaki. This period of isolation allowed Japan to develop a uniquely insular culture, free from external influence for nearly 2 centuries. Despite its isolation, Edo Japan was a time of remarkable cultural and artistic achievement. The arts flourished, particularly in the fields of literature, theater, and visual art. The ukiyo-e woodblock prints became popular, depicting scenes from everyday life, landscapes, and famous kabuki actors. The tales of Genji, a classical Japanese novel, and the haiku poetry of Matsuo Basho also gained prominence during this period. Kabuki theater and bunraku puppet theater captivated audiences with their elaborate performances, and the samurai class, despite their loss of battlefield purpose, continued to refine the martial arts and bushido, or the way of the warrior. Edo itself became one of the largest cities in the world during this time, home to bustling markets, entertainment districts, and cultural hubs. The rise of the merchant class, though officially the lowest in the social hierarchy, led to the creation of a thriving economy. Merchants accumulated wealth and became important patrons of the arts, sponsoring tea houses, theaters, and artists. However, the rigid social order and economic pressures of the Edo period were not without challenges. The peace of the Tokugawa shogunate came at the cost of stifled social mobility, and by the mid-19th century, Japan faced internal unrest. The merchant class had become wealthy, yet their social status remained low, while the samurai, though high in status, were often poor. Peasant revolts became more common as agricultural productivity declined and taxes increased. The eventual downfall of the Edo period came as Japan's isolationist policies collided with the expanding influence of Western powers. In 1853, American Commodore Matthew Perry arrived in Japan with a fleet of black ships, demanding the opening of Japan to trade. Faced with the technological superiority of Western nations, the Tokugawa shogunate had little choice but to comply, leading to the signing of unequal treaties that favored foreign powers. These events sparked internal debates over how Japan should respond to the West, eventually leading to the Meiji Restoration in 1868, when the emperor was restored to power and the Tokugawa shogunate was dissolved. The Edo period was a unique and transformative time in Japan's history. It brought an end to centuries of warfare, established a long-lasting peace, and fostered an explosion of culture and art that defined Japan's identity. Yet, the rigid structures and policies that helped maintain stability eventually led to internal tensions and Japan's opening to the outside world. Final reflections. As we've journeyed through the entire history of ancient Japan, from the enigmatic origins of the Jomon people to the rise of the samurai and the fall of the Tokugawa shogunate, we've seen how each era left its mark on the shaping of Japan's culture, governance, and identity. The threads of myth, religion, power struggles, and innovation are woven into every chapter of this fascinating story. From the Yayoi's agricultural advancements to the warrior code of the samurai, from the political intrigues of the Asuka and Nara courts to the flourishing art and literature of the Heian period, each epoch played a crucial role in shaping the nation we recognize today. The isolation of the Edo period, followed by its opening to the West, set the stage for Japan's modern era, a time when the country would emerge from its feudal past and step onto the world stage. Understanding this deep, rich history gives us not only insight into the past, but also into the enduring spirit of Japan, a nation shaped by perseverance, tradition, and transformation. If this journey through Japan's ancient history has captured your imagination, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell to stay tuned for more deep dives into history, mythology, and culture. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you again on the next adventure.